Title belts to Hall of Fame. Doug and Tommy carved the name. Fists of fury and hearts of gold. Every story, every fight retold. Tales of glory, laughter, cry. Tennessee warriors with hearts open wide. In the ring or on the air, legends living without a care. On the mic they roar, on the mat they soar. Dangerous conversations, fans wanting more. Jazz kings ruling the waves. Memphis wrestling raising the stage.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Dangerous Conversations with Dangerous Doug Gilbert and Tommy Wildfire Rich. Guys, how we doing this morning?
We doing good, man. Hey, it's a beautiful day here in Clarksville, Arkansas. And hey, it's great talking to you, Jay. Ready to get on this show, man.
Man, yeah, it's we missed you last week, Tommy. You know, you was in Philadelphia out there wrestling and getting things done, and me and Doug had a fun conversation with the grappler Lynn Denton.
Oh, we gonna see some grappling this afternoon.
Yeah, I didn't know when we were talking to them that the very next weekend that you and Doug were going to be wrestling the grappler and the grappler number 3. So that should be fun.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a big night over here in Clarksville. It's going to be a big one today.
Well, we have been asking on the Facebook page and on social media for the listeners of the show to send in questions for you guys. They can send them in for each of you separately. They can send you together. So we've got some questions for you individually. We got some questions that both of you guys can answer. So we're going to get right into it. Brandon Miller asks, Tommy, please tell us about Luscious Tommy Rich and the American Wrestling Federation from 1995 and 6.
Man, it was, I tell you what, it was something. It's that Paul, the owner of it, Feinstein?
Alperstein, I think.
Elperstein. I mean, he had the right idea, but I don't know. I mean, of course, I tell you, I teamed up with Greg Valentine, Greg the Hammer Valentine, myself. We were the tag team champions. I mean, and there was some great talent there, too. You had Sergeant Slaughter was there, Tito Santana, Greg the Hammer Valentine, myself. And, I mean, there was a bunch of characters there.
Tell us about your manager. You had a manager named Rico Suave. How was he?
Rico Suave. Hey, he was quite the character too. Him and Paul, they both was from Chicago. They grew up, I guess, friends. Growing up, they were friends. And so when they started the wrestling business, I guess that Rico always wanted to be a manager. So he put him with Greg the Hammer, myself, and shoot, we had a good little run. He just, we'd go wrestle, and he'd have a crowd come in. He'd pay them and have a buffet for. I mean, he spent a lot more, than I think he should have. But I mean, it was a good group of guys that he had, and Jimmy Garvin was there, I think. There was a few other ones. I can't remember them all because a lot of that stuff's blurred.
Oh, yeah, throughout that entire run, I mean, he had some big names come through. Coco was there, and of course you had Terry Taylor announcing, and Mick Karch from the AWA's later days of the AWA. Then you had Powers of Pain was there, and I can't remember it all, but it was quite an impressive list of talent. When you think he would be able to draw crowds without paying people to come watch the show, I remember reading about that and thinking, that's wild. This guy's like recruiting crowds to come in. And
yeah.
He spent a bunch of money in it.
Oh yeah, and then after the show, he'd take all of us out to eat. I mean, he had big bucks, and plus he liked to play them cards a little bit too. So, I don't know, between all of it, I don't know, it just got too much for him or what the deal was, but it was great while it lasted.
Hey, Gene, is he still alive?
No, he passed away a few years back. I believe he had cancer, is what I read.
Okay.
I've been doing. It's funny this
right?
question
See,
came in. I've been doing some research on it because we were going to do a review of one of the episodes for one of my other podcasts, and one of the matches on that show is Tommy wrestling Sergeant Slaughter, and I believe Mr. Hughes is on there. Tito. I forget what the other match was, but I was mostly excited to see Tommy wrestling Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah, shit. I wrestled them. You know, we do the singles, we do tags. But like I said, and that's the first time I was around Greg a whole lot. And, you know, I'd wrestled him a few times. And, you know, to get him, you tell a joke, you me break down laughing, Greg just kind of smiled. But him laughing like you and me. And once I got to know him, he was like one of the coolest dudes I ever met, you know. I mean, Greg, good people.
Now, is that one of those, like, marathon TV tapings where they would tape, like, a whole bunch of episodes in one run?
Yeah, it seemed like we do about 3 or 4 of them at a time, yeah.
Yeah. That seems right.
And did you check, like, you remember them having, instead of falls, they had rounds, you remember?
Yes, that was... What did you think about that? I didn't think the rounds really added anything to a pro wrestling match, you know. I mean, how did you... I mean, I know you get a little rest period in there, which I guess maybe is nice, but I don't know. They really played that up. Oh, we're going to enforce the rules. We've got rounds. And I know it's anything to make something stand out and feel different, but...
and I think that was the whole purpose of it, just trying to have something and be different. And, you know, I mean... I seen it in boxing, I guess, and thought, well, hell, let's try this. It gives it a different twist to the wrestling. And I don't think I'm like you. I mean, you know, back in the day, we had 2 out of 3 fall matches, but that was still different. You'd go, I mean, you'd wrestle, and somebody'd win or lose, and you'd go back to the back, take a little break, come out, and come back, and then somebody'd win or lose, and then if you had the 3rd fall, then you'd do that, you know. But the round, it was hard because in wrestling you got to create a flow, and you couldn't hardly with 3 or 4 minute round, whatever they was. It's hard to get going. By the time you got it going, then the bell would ring and you'd have to start all over again.
Exactly. That's what I was noticing watching some of that is heel would start to, try to start building their heat and the damn round would end and you'd have to stop, then try to start over again. Or the babyface would be in the middle of making a comeback and the round would end and the referee would have split y'all up.
And the people about as dumbfounded as we was.
And he put a lot of crowd noise in there that made it feel really unnatural. It made it feel like one of those, I don't know, one of them wrestling shows, like where they're showing how, secrets of the wrestling or some shit, And
there again, that goes back to paying a crowd to come in because they wasn't wrestling fans and didn't really know what they was clapping or hollering about, So, yeah, they had to put that background, didn't it?
Yeah, it seemed weird because you would hear this loud, there would be a lot of booing and hissing, and then they'd show the crowd, and they're all just sitting there, and none of them are, their mouths aren't even moving, but the noise coming through the screen is just deafening boos. But
yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, so our next question, Alex Simpson asks, Doug, can you please talk about your experience wrestling the Great Muta at WrestleWar 89 in Nashville and how you came about being the replacement for the Junkyard Dog?
Well, actually, it happened. The dog's mom died, and he had to go home for that, and they asked me to wrestle Muta. And I loved wrestling Muta and everything, and, I mean, it was great. And I thought the match was great.
It was, and a lot of times around that time for WCW, you were wrestling under a hood. Did they intentionally have you wrestle as Doug Gilbert just to make that connection with Eddie, since Eddie and Sting were feuding with Muta at the time?
Yeah, they sure did.
That makes sense. All right, well, that's always something I've kind of wanted to ask you about, because I can remember back, at the time when getting the videotape of that. And I'm like, oh man, there's Doug Gilbert on a Wrestling Muta. That's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, Muta was great.
Oh yeah, it's just smooth, and it's funny because they say that they eventually want to turn him babyface because the crowd liked him because all the the moves and the paint and everything, and that Gary Hart talked him into quitting the company because he knew if he went babyface that he'd be out of luck.
Yeah, but I mean, and like all of his moonsaults and all of his stuff, it was really cool.
Oh yeah, it was. As a fan, it was hard to hate him because he was so damn cool. Other than him spitting that mist in everybody's eyes.
Right.
And even that's kind of cool, honestly, if you're a kid,
Oh yeah, all the kids loved it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like Kabuki. I mean, he was a big heel, but spitting the mist, that was great.
Oh yeah. I remember him spitting the mist, and he's out there twirling nunchucks and stuff, and I'm just like, man, this guy's that's pretty cool. He's beating up Devon Eriks, but he's pretty cool.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
All right, so Eddie Extreme asks, Tommy, how was it working with Roddy Piper in Georgia in 1982?
Where to start with Roddy Piper, man? Yeah,
we were just talking about him yesterday.
Yeah, we were talking about him yesterday, just how over he was, and I mean, a hell of a worker, a heck of a on that tube. He could talk. I mean, what you seen was Roddy Piper. I mean, he was hyperactive all the time
And tough.
And, oh yeah, he was a tough one too. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, he come into Georgia, and of course I did a little angle with him, and it drew good money too, and which me and Roddy come to good friends and everything too. So I always enjoyed, Roddy. He come over to the house sometimes, and I mean, we just always had a good time together. But as far as the business, that probably ain't done no better.
No, I agree with that. He was always one of my favorites, and the couple of times that I got a chance to meet him, just one of the nicest, most humble people. You'd meet Roddy at a convention, and he acted like he was excited to meet you as you was to meet him, which always struck me because by then he was a big, he'd been a movie star and everything else. So that always impressed me.
Yeah, but some people that you don't forget your roots, man. Roddy always knew. I mean, that, hey, just like the ones that really know. I mean, if it wasn't for them fans out there, they wouldn't be. I mean, he had that persona. And people loved to hate him, but they like you talk about at the convention. He'd be a perfect gentleman and be nice and do his job. But at that building, he was strictly a heel. That's for damn sure.
Hey, Gene, you know who emulated him, right? Tom Pritchard.
Oh, now Tom Pritchard did a straight-up impression. I almost asked him about that when we had Tom on the podcast. I almost asked him about that, but I was afraid it would come off like I was being a jerk or something. But man, you go back and watch them promos, especially like those 90s USWA promos, and it's like he's doing just a straight-up impression of Roddy Piper. I've always been curious about that.
He loved Roddy Piper.
Oh, yeah, you can take audio of some Tom Pritchard promos from the 90s and play them for somebody, and if they can't see the video, some of those, they'd be hard-pressed to tell you whether or not that was Piper or whether that was Tom, because, I mean, he's got, of course, Bruce can do a great do a great Roddy Piper impression as well. He's been known to do on his podcast. So.
Yeah, because they both loved it.
And rightfully so. Now, this next question...
Jen,
yeah, go ahead.
Jen, man, I'm loving this Q&A. I just want to tell everybody else to send questions in, man. Yeah, we'll give you all the answers.
Yeah, by all means, folks, if there's anything you want to know, please send them in. You can send them in on the Facebook. You can email them to DougGilbertPodcast@Outlook.com, and I'll be glad to ask the guys, because these are always fun because we're able to cover a lot of different topics and things that may not necessarily come up that are going to warrant an entire episode, but they're definitely things that, it's fun to ask, and it's fun. I know it jogs you guys' memories and sometimes brings up other things that we might not ever get to if people didn't send these questions in. So it's great.
Oh yeah, and hey, and I just want to let everybody know I'm doing a podcast with y'all now, and it's only gonna get better, man. Y'all send them questions and answers in, but tune in, y'all. Tell your friends about it, because it's gonna be the new hot commodity.
That's right, and we're getting ready to start. We're gonna start doing some giveaways. We're trying to get us some T-shirts designed and some different things, and so we'll start having some contests on our Facebook. If you hadn't yet, follow the Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich Facebook page. Follow us on X, formerly Twitter, and you'll get some opportunities to win some pretty cool stuff coming up. And we're currently brainstorming some other things we can offer you, because the listeners have been so good, guys, with doing stuff like this, sending in questions and listening and downloading the show. I've really been excited about the amount of people that are showing interest in this podcast. And
I'm just being the ratings, man. They off the chain too, man. What in Ireland? What are we?
Oh my gosh, we float up and down the top 10. I mean, there was a week in Ireland recently where we were like in the top 5. It was like The Undertaker, Pritchard, Cornette, and then like us. Like it's we're up there with the big boys. So and that's thanks to the listeners.
You might say that stuff's catching on like wildfire, ain't you?
You definitely could. So we'll keep going here. We got quite a few more questions. Philip Glover asked, and Tracy Carter on Facebook asked a similar question. Now, this is for both of you guys, and this one may be a little tough. I'm interested to see how you guys answer this. He said, how would you guys rate and compare Lance Russell and Gordon Soley as announcers in their prime?
Shoot, I'm going to tell you. To me, you named the top two. I mean, Lance, he was that country, truthful guy, and then you got Gordon Soley that was gluteus maximus. That I mean, they would make you or break you. Them two, when they talked about you, the people believed. If they said something good about you, people believed it. If they said something bad about you, people believed that too, because their word was as good as gold. I mean, them two made a bunch of people.
What do you think, Doug?
Gene, I like Gordon, but Lance has always been my favorite. But, I mean, they drew a bunch of money for us, just like Tommy said.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's...
And
they are the two best. I don't think anybody can really argue that.
No, and I mean, Lance was like your uncle or something. That I mean, he was like the great guy that could sell anything, and if anybody couldn't do anything, he would make them. I mean, he would make the interview.
That's what I like about Lance. That's what I think kind of gives him the edge in that respect, is the fact that, like you said, he can make the interview and
that's what I think. And I don't mean to talk over you, but that's what I think. But Tommy went down there to Atlanta and drew so much money, so he probably likes Gordon a little better.
Well, I mean, like I said, both of them. I mean, they're two different styles, but they were both, I think, the best at what they did.
Yeah, I'll agree with him at that. But probably with Gordon and Tommy winning the NWA World title, he probably likes both of them about the same, though, I'd say.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't not love Lance Russell. And Gordon a little harder to get to know, but once you got to know Gordon, I mean, he took, I was just a little punk kid, and he said a lot of good things about me. And it's like Dougie said, Lance could make you believe, and so could Gordon. Gordon was the type that, whether you liked Gordon or didn't, you knew what he was telling you was true,
I don't know about that blue Maximus or whatever you said.
Well, he just used them big words and stuff, like I'd be in the back, he'd say, I don't know if it's gluteus maximus, but anyway, like Butticus or whatever, instead of your butt, he'd say Butticus or whatever it is. He had them technical terms, which I sit in the back, I think, hell, I don't even know what that is to the people. But because nobody else did that, I think it caught on and people got it.
Hey, Gene.
Yeah.
You know what that meant? Gluteus maximus.
That's your bud, ain't it?
Yeah. He's being funny.
That's fancy way of talking about your backside. But yeah, I think, Lance was more relatable. Lance, like you said, is like your uncle, where Soley, like Tommy said, it was two very different styles. Soley come off like your legitimate sports announcer, like your Howard Cosell's of the day, and the guys who are, calling, boxing and regular sports. And, high vertical suplex, like he just had words that nobody said at all, much less, terms. So I think it really is where you come from. You could take some guys from Georgia and set them across from some guys from Tennessee, and they could probably come to blows over who's the best. And it's really just what you grew up around and what you're used to.
Yeah. Hey, Gene, you think you just like Tommy's butt?
Do what?
I said, you think you just like Tommy's butt?
He may have. I don't. So our next question. Some of these names, people give their regular names, and then some people make things up. I'm guessing this one's made up. The Canadian Destroyer asks, in the territory days, what were some of the signs you looked for that let you know it was time to put in your notice and move on to another territory?
Well, if you wasn't happy or it wasn't being, the bottom line is if you come in at a certain spot and you started to decline, then you knew it was time to go. But in a lot of situations like that, you'd get the opportunity, and I was listening to yours and Doug's thing with Lynn. We got paid by putting asses in the seats. That was the bottom line. And if you wasn't drawing money, then they'd move you down the car, and you might leave Georgia and go to Florida, or go to Florida and maybe not get a break there, but go to Texas, and then boom, you're off to the races. That was the good thing about when it was territories, and I think that's what a lot of the kids miss today. You won and done. You go WWE or AEW, and if you don't make it, then you're just off to the independents. Used to. Even if you was on the underneath card, you could still work it 6 days a week. You could make a living at something you love. And like I said, you might not get your break in Georgia. You might go to Kansas City and not get it there, but come to Tennessee and boom, you're off to the races. It was a lot more opportunity, I think, back then. And I'm going to tell you, back then even, you go some independents and first few matches you might not think is very good, but back then when it was territories, your first match to your last match, they was all good, solid matches.
I've heard you talk about in interviews before, Tommy, that you were kind of in a unique position in Georgia where, like you was talking about, you kind of worked your way up into the main event with singles feuds, and eventually they're going to cycle you back down, a long way down the card and kind of work you back up. But with you would have a main event angle, and rather than moving you too far down the card, they'd put you in a tag team with somebody, and you'd run an angle as a tag team, and then break back off into a single. So you were so over, you always tended to stay towards the top of the card either way. But that wasn't usually the case, most of the time, was it?
No, and that's where I was different from say the Rock and Roll Express, the Fantastics. That's what they were built for, was tags. Whereas with me, I was very fortunate. I was there in Georgia, and when I went, I was an old Tennessee country boy, and they ain't never seen nothing like me. And like I said, Abdullah beat me the first night, 30 seconds, buzzed my head. Tony Atlas saved me, and I was ready to go back home to Tennessee. He said, "No, stay." And anyway, I stayed. They they tagged me and Tony together, first salt and pepper team to win the Georgia Southern Tag Team titles. And then we had our run, and Tony left, and so I went into a single. They seen I could do stuff with that, and you know, it was just, I was very blessed because usually you have, like, if you strictly a tag team and you runs out, then you go to Florida, wherever, you go somewhere from where you're at. And a lot of times, unless they just didn't like you, they'd let you know, hey, let's see about sending you somewhere or something. I mean, so, but like I said, I was lucky. I did some in and out shots, like for Watts and stuff like that. But really, Tennessee and Georgia is really the only territories I ever worked.
Right. And Doug, you did something similar, right? Where, you would come in and you'd work a hot angle, and then it'd be time for you to go back and do a tour of Japan. So then you'd go away for a little bit, and then you'd come back from Japan, and it was like you were fresh again, and they could throw you right back into a hot angle. So, you never moved very far down the card either.
No, you're correct. And everything went really good.
That's awesome.
But I mean, it was cool to go to Japan. I'd go about every 2 months and everything, every 3 months, 2 months, and it was really cool.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about. I think there is one question here about Japan that, I mean, it's not going to allow for us to dig too deep, but we're gonna dedicate a whole episode before too much longer to talking about Japan, because Tommy, you made some trips to Japan, and I think the listeners are really interested to hear more about how those tours worked and what they were like day to day, besides just what people saw in the ring. So that's definitely something coming up soon. But Tony Ware asks, Tommy, do you have any stories about Andre the Giant from back in the territory days?
Oh, well, my most amazing story with him was when I just bought me a new, they all drove Lincolns and Cadillacs and stuff, and I thought, wow, boy, I want to do that. But anyway, I bought me old 76 Oldsmobile Regency. It was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'll never forget his translator. And he was pretty new to the States, didn't speak much English, so he had a translator named Frenchie. And they asked me if I'd give him the office, if I'd give him a ride back to Nashville. We was in Louisville, and I said, well, no. And, I was like 18, like I was going to say no anyway. But so anyway, long story short, we picked Frenchie up. Well, as I'm pulling in, I run the car up on the curb, and the car goes kaboom, da boom. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, I hope he don't slap me. So anyway, we get Frenchie. And so Andre, he knew bathroom and beer. He said, beer, boss, beer. So we stopped to get beer, and back then, like I said, I drank about a little pony pack of Millers, 8-pack of pony Millers on the way back home. And so they went in to get the beer. They come out, and Andre had a big box in his hand, and that Frenchie had a box in his. Well, they bought me a case of pony Millers, 6 8-packs. I thought, oh, my God. But no, just one of them be fine. But anyway, Andre bought him a case of quart beers. Wow. And what I'll never forget is looking over and that 7-ounce beer in my hand, looking like he had the quart in his hand. It didn't look like he was holding a 7-ounce bottle. I mean, his hand was so freaking big. Wow. And then the night I won, and then, of course, Rick Martel, me and Ricky teamed together. And, he's French-Canadian, just like Andre, and they were real good friends. Anytime he'd come in, we'd always take Andre out, And the night I won the World Heavyweight title, he was in Augusta, Georgia. He come down to the ring, put me up on his shoulder. He knew my wife. I mean, we anytime he's in town, we always went out with him. And, he was just a really, really good person.
So I guess it's hard to keep a low profile when you go out with Andre the Giant. Like, everybody's aware you're there, right?
Oh yeah. And what's sad? I mean, he just he just want to come have a good time. And everybody else want to call him, stupid people call him a freak and come up and ask dumb questions. So he had to deal with all of that on top. I mean, can you imagine? Especially you talk about Japan. And the beds are probably half the size of the bed in the hotels now that we stay in. They probably was half the size. So can you imagine and going to the bathrooms are like a little bit bigger than ones on an airplane? I mean, just all the trouble he had to go through, and he traveled all the time.
They said when he had to go to the bathroom and like take a dump, he'd have to sit in the shower, and they'd run water.
Oh gosh!
Can you believe that? That's something. But I mean, he had so many difficulties. You know, it was strange.
Yeah, people didn't consider, like, just in his day-to-day life, what a inconvenience it was to be that big. Then plus, like you mentioned, just dealing with everybody's reaction to him. You know, you can't just leave the hotel and go walk around and not be bothered and not, you know, have people look at you like,
no.
You know, sad.
And that's so anywhere he was. I mean, and you know, which I mean that's he signed up for that when he signed up for wrestling. But you know, sometimes people can be a little mean or whatever too. You know, just don't get it. I mean, instead of giving him his space and ask for an autograph, they come up and ask for a dumb question. You know, so you know he was just, to me, he lived a tough, hard life.
Well, that's cool. You got to know him and you know, hang out with him and everything. And I know there's a lot of people that, you know, are always looking for some insight about Andre. So I was glad that question came in. I knew that would be a fun one. Now, speaking of fun questions, this should be interesting, and this is for both of you guys. Mr. R number 2 asks, who do you guys think is the greatest masked wrestler of all time? Mr. R number 2 personally thinks it's the masked superstar Bill Eadie, although I would have thought that he would think it's Mr. R. But
I don't know. Mr. R, he kind of just wild. No, but I tell you what, I didn't see, and I got to wrestle all them guys. I mean, you talk about Bill Eadie, Kim Patera. I mean, guys that just took me and made me look like a piece of dog stink, and they took and taught me, you know. And they didn't, you know, like it wasn't no jealousy. They knew that I drew money, that I draw money with them. And Bill Eadie, I mean, wrestling too. I mean, he was pretty good under the mask. I mean, not one of his biggest fans maybe, but I mean, wrestling too. I mean, I'd see him leave the building. He'd ride 2 miles down the road with his mask on before he, you know, would ever he didn't even take it off in the shower. You know, I mean, he could. You know, he just, of course, he wasn't the prettiest person in the world either, you know. But Bill Eadie, I don't know. What do you think, Doug?
I think Bill Eadie. I like Frank Morrell as the spoiler.
I think you guys are going to be wrestling one of the greatest masked wrestlers, in my opinion, Lynn Denton.
Well, yeah, exactly. Lynn's great, but I had them wrestling this. This be the first night that I was wrestling. Wow. And everything. But Tommy's wrestled before, but this be the first night. What was it? Jardine?
The spoiler?
Yeah. I watched some of his stuff, and I thought he was good. And
actually, it became mostly just the Lucha guys that wore the mask.
What I was fixing to say, Mil Mascaras, Dos Caras, as far as the 2 Mexican guys. Yeah, the interns, they was great and everything, and the medics one at the time. The medics, there's a lot of them that I really like. Dark Patriot was pretty good too, wasn't he?
Well, I was disappointed nobody named the Dark Patriot.
Dark Patriot, yeah, there you go.
That Patriot wasn't too hot, but the Dark Patriot sure was something.
Hey, no, the Patriot deal, he was great too.
No, he was. He really found himself with that gimmick. I remember seeing him without the mask as the trooper in the AWA and just felt like something was missing. And then when he got the mask and that whole gimmick, he really took to it, and it certainly did well for him. But now what I was going to mention is it true, like, you know, so like back in the day, you know, when you'd get like a set of interns over on TV or, you know, whatever mass tag team, then you could send you'd have a different set that you could send to like the B town that you're getting to use your TV gimmick that's over, but it's actually two different guys wrestling, a couple of baby faces, and you can actually send them to 2 or 3 different towns on a particular night, and nobody would really know.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
Backyard.
Now, the backyard wrestling might have done that, but the real stuff like we did, they didn't.
Okay. So that was just those outlaw promoters that were trying to convince you that you were seeing somebody.
Exactly.
Okay. See, that's what this show is good for, because you can help dispel some of these rumors that people spread around as fact for years and years and years. So that's
what we want to do, don't we?
Absolutely. That's awesome. So yeah, we're gonna put a bow on that question by saying greatest mass wrestler, Dark Patriot. Moving on.
There you go.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews. Sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
Well, hey, let me ask you this before we move past that. We talked to Doug recently. We asked Doug and the Grappler how they felt about working in a mask. How did you like that, Tommy? The times you ever wrestled in a mask, did you enjoy it? Was it awkward?
Well, for no longer than I had to do it, it was fine. But there's an art to that, too. Because, like me, my thing was getting the daylights beat out of me and selling. And I would sell with my face. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
show it was all facial. Where if you're wearing a mask, you ain't got that option. You have to sell with your body. So that is and that's an art to that too.
Hey, Gene.
Yeah.
That's what me and you talking about, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what you guys said. Lest we forget another great masked wrestler who didn't start out as a masked wrestler, but he finished out the last, probably 20 years of his career, the Bullet, Bob Armstrong.
Hey, Gene.
Yeah, Bullet Bob, yeah.
Yeah, Bullet Bob, and also the Blue Avenger. What was his name? Reggie Parks.
Oh, Reggie, yeah, I remember Reggie, yeah.
And he was Blue Avenger, right, Gene?
Yes, sir. That's him.
And he was a great worker.
And I remember there being a Mr. Wrestling in Memphis 1985 we've been watching recently who bared a strong resemblance to someone's father on this podcast.
Yeah. I should have said that first.
You know what? And another mass team that weren't you and your dad? Didn't you guys wrestle briefly as the Wrestling Machines in like around '89?
In Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Yep, we sure did.
All right. So David Mitchell asks, and again, this is similar to a question that Tracy Carter asked on, and this is kind of deep here. Well, y'all might have to mull this over. We may have to clip it where y'all have to take a moment. But it says, do either or both of you have a specific moment in your wrestling career that you look back on and think, if you had made a different decision, your entire career would have been different? Not that you should have or would have, but just if you had, it would have been drastically different.
Oh, we can always do things different, but would I done anything different? I don't think so. I don't think so. The 80s was a different time, man. I mean, it's, we wrestled 6-7 days a week, sometimes 10 times in a week. Some people might say we did things we shouldn't do, but when you be on the road, you be beat up or whatever the situation may be, it's tough sometimes. And some folks get like mine was a big drinking problem, but I always did my job and was there. They say go 45 minutes. I go 45 minutes. So to me, that ain't a problem. I mean, to some people, they would say it was a problem. But, if I'd been 20 years later, I might wish I was up there with the big boys making them big bucks. I mean, we paved the road, working the territories and so, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't change nothing. No.
I got you. Doug?
Well, there's probably an interview or two I shouldn't have done. but let's see what else I shouldn't have done.
I tell you the one thing, not that you shouldn't have done, but the first thing that came to mind to me when I read this question, as far as things that you and I have talked about on this podcast, as far as if you made a different decision, it may have affected your career differently. And again, I don't think of it as a mistake or anything, but just how you talked about had you went to Kuwait and did the King of Rock and Roll gimmick for Vince. It's not to say your career or life would have been any better, but it probably would have made a big difference. Like you would have took a different path, right?
That's exactly right. And I could have probably made a lot more money, but Japan was guaranteed. And if you go to Japan, and I went like 55 times or so, that was guaranteed. And if you work hard over there, you always are going to go back.
Right. And with Vince, if he has a bad day and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, your whole career could change in the course of an afternoon.
And two, I should have went to the Royal Rumble the day I should have went, and I changed my ticket. So that wasn't a good thing for Vince. So everybody else went up there and talked to him, and when they called my name, I was the only one that wasn't there. And I flew in the next day and got in there 2 hours before the show started. So that probably wasn't too good. But anyway, I just didn't want to go to Kuwait, and I had my deal in Japan, and that was kind of the deal.
Hey, it all worked out. You guys have had good careers, and who's to say if you did anything different, you might not be sitting there with Tommy in Clarksville, Arkansas today. And where else would you want to be right now than there?
Home, but hey, we have a good time talking to you, so that's good.
Oh yeah, we're having fun. So here's a fun. So I don't know if this is this person's real name. I'm assuming it's not. But Robbie Heenan asks, who is each of you guys' favorite manager that you ever had manage you during your career, be it from their work aspect of things or just you enjoyed being around them or traveling with them outside the ring? Rico Suave?
I didn't say that. Yeah, Rico Suave, but Jimmy Hart, he's hard to beat, Jimmy Hart.
Oh, yeah.
And when I first, that was one of my first managers was Jimmy. But I'm going to tell you, he never managed me, but he was one hell of a manager, was that guy from ECW, the Big Don, Tommy Rich. But I had a lot of fun with that too. I mean, of course, them Northern Yankee folk, they didn't care too much about Tracy Smothers and myself. Tell Southern boys with little Guido coming out there and claiming they's the Big Don and the Paisan, and so I really had a lot of fun with that. I didn't ever know managing to be that much fun, but I had a good time doing that, and we're getting in there again. The managers, in which I'm gonna tell you, Bobby Heenan, he was a good manager too. I mean, he never managed me, but I mean there was Dr. Ken Ramey, that managed the interns. He was a hell of a manager,
Say mine, Gene, and you're gonna laugh, but Scott Bowden was one of my favorite managers, but Jimmy Hart managed me too, and you can't beat him. A guy that managed me and Tommy both. Yeah. What was his name, Tommy?
I swear I was sitting here thinking.
Brown. His last name was Brown.
Big Business Brown?
Big Business Brown. Brown.
Yeah.
He was a piece of work. And I mean, you know where he come from?
No, I was always curious of that.
He worked on QVC, and he called Lawler and asked him could he come in and be a manager.
Oh,
and Lawler said yeah. And I wonder what Lawler got for that.
There's no telling. I couldn't find anything with him.
Oh, well, I should say I should have said that, should I?
We'll have another podcast a couple of years from now. You go like, well, if I hadn't said that day on the podcast about.
No, that's fine.
No,
but no, he was. But Lawler got him brought in. He called Lawler QVC and everything. That's what. But he was at the ring with Tommy one day at TV, and he took a bump off the ring, and he broke his arm. And for about 2 weeks, he didn't do no kind of drugs or drink or nothing. And Tommy had drinking for 2 weeks, and then he wound up going to get his arm x-rayed, and it was broke.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, he was on the apron. Yeah, he was on the apron, and then knocked him off, and it broke his arm. But, wow. I mean, but he was a good guy, though.
Yeah, I was getting clips for the Facebook here a while back, and I was watching some of y'all's stuff with him, and I was kind of curious. I'm glad this came up because I was kind of curious of where he came from, so that's fun.
Yeah, it's a good deal and everything, but he was a super nice guy.
And I was glad to hear you say Scott Bowden. I was always a big fan of Scott Bowden. I got to know Scott a little bit after his wrestling career, and we talked some. He did a podcast, a couple of interviews with me, and I was kind of bummed out when Bruno didn't have anything real positive memories of working with him, so I'm glad to hear that you guys did. And I absolutely love all the FBI and Big Don stuff in ECW. We're going to do an ECW episode eventually, too, talking about both of you guys' experience there, even though I'm sure your experiences were a little different, seeing you were there at different times. But my mission is eventually to get me an Italian flag with Tommy's face airbrushed on it, just like the one he used to bring in the ring. I want one of those in my wrestling room here.
We'll get you one.
So, a couple more questions here. We're winding down the show, but it's funny, we were talking about masked guys earlier. You'd think these guys would have came up. So Russell Morris asked, what do you guys think of the team of Roger Smith and Don Bass? Personally, I don't think they get talked about enough, the listener says. But for his money, they helped draw a ton of money in Memphis over the years, and he thinks they should get more love.
Oh, yeah. Roger Smith and Don Bass, yeah, they was in Memphis, yeah, they drew money. Yeah, Dougie said they called him Fire and Flame. I mean, and back then, I mean, it just and a tag team, it's a little harder because you got to have a little time, and and so and there was, I mean, which there's good tag teams now. I'm not saying that. I mean, they're probably great tag teams, which I don't keep up with it probably as much as I should. But back then, I mean, especially the ones that were established tag teams, they all went around the loop, I mean, to each territory, and they all draw good money. I mean, at one time or another, they, and it was, the masked men, people just hated the masked men, too. I don't know why. But of course, and like you talked about Sam Bass, to me too, I didn't even give him credit. Yeah, Lord, had some of my first matches was with him and Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey.
Hey, Gene, I told you Sam's great, hadn't I?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's come up a few different times, and you've always told some fun stories about him and talked about how good he was. So this is an interesting question. He directed it towards Doug, but really I feel like both of you guys can probably have some input on this. But Paul Sanders asks, Doug, if Eddie were still with us today, how do you think he would feel about the current television wrestling product? And is there anyone that has come up in the past 10 to 15 years that you feel like Eddie would have taken an interest in?
Eddie would have made his own stars, and I hadn't kept up with enough really to tell you that, but I mean, he would have made his own guys,
right?
And but Eddie had mind for the business, and he would have made who he wanted to make. And I mean, just same as like Shane Douglas, he started him. I mean, Troy Martin, he changed his name to Shane Douglas and everything. And I mean, it's just Tommy can tell you how Eddie thought and everything, and I let him do that.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, not only did Eddie have a great mind for the angles and the business part, but he could take, and like Dougie said, he could take and make an apple out of fruit salad, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
I mean, he wouldn't have to particularly be a top guy. He'd see a couple of guys, or one guy that was even like middle card, and he would take and make them. He would put a gimmick on them and start using them a different way, and he would build a character. He would make you a character. Whether your name was Joe Bevins, he turned you into Superman or whatever. But he had that art for that business. That's hard to do. Plus, the guy that you're doing that with, he's got to believe in it. And that's one thing. Eddie always had loyalty. And the people, if Eddie told you something, you could take it to the bank. I always know.
So this person's got an interesting handle here. The Mandalorian Stomper asks, Tommy, I was studying some 1982 results, and in March of 1982, you wrestled Ric Flair for the NWA World title on consecutive shows in Augusta, Georgia, and Columbus, Georgia. And then just 2 nights later, you were down in Houston, Texas, wrestling Nick Bockwinkel for the AWA World title. Who did you enjoy working with more? And as world champions, how would you compare the two?
Oh, Nick Bockwinkel, Nick, he was not only a gentleman outside the ring, but a gentleman inside the ring. And you talk about another one that had a good head for this business. Nick.
Who was those on there?
Flair.
Oh, Flair.
Yeah, where like Nick, whether he was wrestling Doug, if he wrestled Doug, he'd wrestle Doug's style. If he wrestled me the next night, he'd wrestle my style. Whereas Flair, you would wrestle Flair's style. It didn't matter who Flair wrestled. It was the same match with who he wrestled.
I think a lot of the younger people, I wish they'd go back and find some Nick Bockwinkel matches and promos and everything and study him. I think he doesn't get enough credit for being as great as he was. He was one of the best world champions ever, in my opinion.
Hey, Gene.
Yeah.
Bockwinkel to me was about the best world champion.
Yeah.
I agree. And he carried himself like a world champion. And when you saw him step on the screen, whether it was in the ring or walking in a promo in that suit holding the belt. Like to me, he looked like when somebody says world champion, to me, that's the kind of guy you picture, classy.
And he didn't have to hoop and holler. He'd come out there in that suit with that belt, and he'd be like a mild businessman. He'd let you know what was what time it was, and what to expect, And he didn't have to holler and scream, which I do a lot of hollering and screaming. But yeah, Nick, I didn't even think about Nick. That's a good name to throw in there.
Yeah, I'm glad that. Again, like you pointed out earlier, Tomer, that's what's great about the listeners sending in these questions, because they bring up things that we might not necessarily bring up on our own just because we don't think about them, and we know that we're talking about things and addressing things that the listeners want to hear because it's coming directly from them. So, and we're going to wrap up.
Hey, Gene, we need to get all the people to put their stars and everything in.
Oh yeah, get your reviews. If you'll rate and review the show, if you'll go in and give us 5 stars, give your throw in some comments, tell us what you enjoy about the show, or things you'd like to hear more of or less of, or anything like that.
Yeah, we need to get the ratings on, everybody listen and everything, and we'd really love that.
It helps us out a lot because we just want this show to be what the listeners want it to be. We want to give you what you want to hear, and the easiest way to do that is by letting us know what you want to hear, and we'll be glad to make that happen. So get on there and rate and review us, and subscribe to the whatever platform, man, we're on. If you listen to podcasts on it, Dangerous Conversations is on there. You can find us.
Hey, make sure to rate and review us.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Doug, because it would have slipped my mind once again.
Gene, hey, brother, you know more about this wrestling. I forgot a lot, but just the questions you ask brings back a lot of memories and kind of shakes my head up a little bit to where I have to think back and reminisce, and that's so cool to get back and like these questions we've had today. That's stuff that you don't usually ask, and I've really enjoyed this today. So yeah, everybody send your Q&As. You got questions, send them in to Gene, and cause that's what Doug and me's here for. We want to answer the questions. Give us that 5-star rating, because we want everybody to hear, hey, hear our voice, because I think, one thing about it, some guys BS. We ain't got nothing to BS about. If you ask us something, we're going to tell you the best of our ability. And if it's something I can't answer, I'm going to say no comment,
There you go.
And then Doug, you said he'd answer it. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. And the fun thing is you guys ask these questions. It gets Tommy and Doug to thinking, and they're about to have a long car trip heading back from Arkansas, and they'll talk about some of the stuff, and that'll jog some other memories. So then the more things that come to the surface, then they can come to me and be like, hey, we just thought about this. Let's talk about that on the show. And man, you guys have been so many places, wrestled so many people. There's just so many stories. We just gotta dredge them all up.
Hey, Gene.
Yes, sir.
You got to come on one of these road trips with us.
Oh, I absolutely can't wait to do that. I will be more than excited to do that, because there's no telling what all kinds of fun stuff we can catch on the road. Some of it we'll be able to put out, and some of it we probably won't. We'll probably
we might have to video a little bit of it.
Yeah, we'll get some video for the YouTube channel. We'll have all kinds of good stuff. Maybe get some footage of y'all go into the ring for some of these matches, and there's all kinds of fun stuff we can do with that. So yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to get on the road with you guys.
Like you said, you got to. Hey, you put this together, man. You've done one hell of a job, and that's like you were saying, like the giveaways and the different things. It's so much stuff that you've got ideas about to add to this, and the people's input, that helps us out more. So, hey, I think you're doing a great job. I'm glad to be on board with you and Dougie. And, hey, keep the questions coming and give us that rate.
We're going to wrap this one up. We'll save these other questions for our next one. And if your question didn't make it in, I promise you it's going to. We've got it listed here. We just, I don't like, me and Doug have talked about this at the beginning when we first started this, and I'm sure Tommy feels the same way. Man, there's people that do these 3 and 4 hour marathon podcasts every week, and we don't want to take up that much of your time, man. We want to get in, do about an hour, have a little fun, and then you can come back next week. We'll talk some more. We don't need to talk about everything all at once,
Yeah. I don't even like to go watch a good 3-hour movie, let alone sit and listen to somebody podcast. I mean, and that's the reason I'm enjoying this so much. Between all three of us, it's fresh, it's new, and everybody's got an answer. So if Dougie can't answer the question, maybe I can. If not, you know the history, so you can too. So, like I said, just keep the questions coming in, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Hey, I'm going to give you one good quick story about Japan. One night we had the night off, and it was me, Doug, Leatherface, who's with me?
Ricky
Patterson. And we in the taxi cab. Well, they in the back seat, and I'm in the front seat. And this taxi driver, we going down the road, and he looks at them, and he say, wrestlers. And they said, yeah, because he couldn't speak much English. And he looked at me, he said, you? I said, yeah, I'm wrestling. He said, you don't wrestle. He said, you're a singer. He thought I was John Bon Jovi. So he rode us. I forgot where we rode, but the ticket fare was high. Huh? Rapunga. Yeah, we went down to Rapunga. That's the wild part of town there.
No, we went off that. We worked at Cork and Hall.
And then went out. Yeah. So, but anyway, the taxi driver, I told him John Bon Jovi was playing there.
Oh.
The next day or so.
Yeah, what the deal is, Gene, Cork and Hall is right beside the Tokyo Dome and everything. And he was playing at Tokyo Dome. John Bon Jovi was. And we was wrestling at Cork and Hall. And he said wrestlers for us, and he said, told Tommy he was John Bon Jovi. And I popped.
hey, I signed him a paper.
He's telling that story to this day.
Yeah. Oh, did I tell you about me getting his name? Tell him there'd be some pigs there and he didn't charge me. Yeah. That's but the culture there, man. I mean, it was. The first time I went for 6 weeks and I was begging, and that was before it was more westernized. It was 6 weeks, and of course there wasn't cell phones. You had to call on the damn house phone, and after 6 weeks, about the 4th weekend, I'm calling my wife. I'm crying to come home, and then to go up get to the 5th week. And I know I'm getting that big payday, so then it all got good, But, yeah, Japan was a lot of fun.
Hey, Gene, peace. Me and Tommy are out.
Hey, as a little added note, I just wanted to mention that Doug wanted me to tell you all that his all-time favorite masked wrestler was the Ace of Spades. And if you don't know who that is, Google him, look it up, and you'll see exactly why the Ace of Spades is one of Doug's favorite masked wrestlers, and one of mine as well. Before we get out of here, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone, if you have an upcoming wrestling show, autograph signing, collector show, Comic-Con, or any event or booking that you would like to inquire about the services of Dangerous Doug Gilbert and or Tommy Wildfire Rich, just send us an email at DougGilbertPodcast@Outlook.com, and someone will get back to you as soon as possible to get more information on your event and do the best we can to make that happen. Also, if you are interested in advertising your event, your business, your product to the listeners of Dangerous Conversations, as well as to promote your event, business, or product across all our social media platforms, you can send that inquiry to DougGilbertPodcast@Outlook.com. We would love to work together with you to get that out there to the listeners of Dangerous Conversations. Remember to check out DougGilbertPodcast.com. There you can find links to all things related to this podcast, as well as Doug and Tommy themselves. You'll find a link to the Dangerous Conversations Facebook page and the Dangerous Conversations Twitter, now known as X. And we're always posting content daily, involving the Gilbert family, Tommy Rich, all sorts of things from their career. We got magazine articles, videos, pictures, you name it. We're posting new content every single day. Make sure you follow so you don't miss out on any of that. Plus, you can follow Doug and Tommy's personal Facebook pages on there. Dangerous Doug Gilbert. You can search that on Facebook. You can also search Tommy Wildfire Rich. They both have Facebook pages. And Doug does have an X page as well, and you can follow them there. But if you really want to help support, you can go to the Gilbert Family Pro Wrestling Tees store, which there's a link to there on the DougGilbertPodcast.com, and you can find t-shirts of Doug, Eddie, and their famous father, Tommy Gilbert, as well. Also, Tommy Rich is going to be having some t-shirts coming up very soon. Follow him on Facebook. We'll be talking about him here. But look for some cool new Tommy Wildfire Rich t-shirts coming out soon that you can partake in as well. Also, if you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on the platform of your choice. It would really help us in building up the podcast for the future. Plus, it helps us know what you like, what you don't like, where we need to take this podcast moving forward. Also, if you want to see a whole bunch of matches, promos, and angles, a lot of the ones that you're going to hear us talk about on this very podcast, you can go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@RetroWrestlingArchive. Of course, it's linked right there at DougGilbertPodcast.com, and you will find a ton of matches featuring Eddie Gilbert, Tommy Gilbert, Doug Gilbert, Tommy Wildfire Rich. There's playlists of all them that feature hundreds of matches of each of them. So make sure you go check that out. And not just of them, there are thousands, literally, at this point, of videos from wrestling from across the territory days, you name it. If we don't have the video uploaded to our channel, we at least have organized you a playlist of just about every territory, every show that's out there. You can find it in one convenient location there on YouTube at the Retro Wrestling Archive. Plus, don't forget, you can find all things related to my popular Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast at uswapodcast.com. And last but certainly not least, we are proud to be a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Go on over to WrestleCopia.com to check out all the great pro wrestling related podcasts and various content that our friend Ray Russell provides you. You'll be glad you did. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Dangerous Conversations with Dangerous Doug Gilbert and Tommy Wildfire Rich.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/wrestlepod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
In the heart of Tennessee, born with pride, Doug and Tommy taking rings in stride. Memphis legends never backing down. Wrestling warriors, they wear the crown. You scurry away, glory in their veins. Fighting legends breaking chains. In the squared circle they made their name. Podcast champions, it's their claim to fame. On the mic they roar, on the map they soar. Dangerous conversations, fans wanting more. Podcast kings ruling the waves. Memphis wrestling raising the stage. From title belts to Hall of Fame, Doug and Tommy carved the name. Fists of fury and hearts of gold. Every story, every fight retold. Tales of glory, laughter, pride. Tennessee warriors with hearts open wide. In the ring or on the air, legends living without a care. On the mic they roar, on the mat they soar. Dangerous conversations, fans wanting more. Podcast